Let's talk about diversity.
Diversity and inclusion.
Okay, so IPAD was given this fabulous opportunity. There is a brand new Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management, started by Chauncey Willis, who some of you may know is kind of a player in the IABM, or International Association of Emergency Management. They're having an invitation-only seminar right before IABM conference, which is next week in Georgia. They're having an all-day convening workshop, and I was lucky enough to be invited by an Amazon colleague. So they're really going to look at what are we doing? You know, it used to be that it was only men in emergency management. We've changed that. That's not true anymore, but we have not done as good a job of recruiting people of color. So we're going to look at an action plan. They've got a whole bunch of exercises planned for that. So that's this coming Saturday. So I'm really excited about that. And then Linda and I got to talking about, you know, what's happening. We really kind of, the students in the courses are kind of mirroring that as well. So people that traditionally know what emergency management is tend to gravitate that way, whether it's, you know, the traditional kind of public safety professions. When I started in emergency management a long time ago, when it was called civil defense, it was all, I know, don't laugh, but I am that old. But it was all ex-military. And then they were like, and you are here because why are you here? I got a lot of that. But anyway, we've come a long way, so that's good. But looking at the, you know, student population, part of the discussion that Linda and I had was really that we have this great profession that we're still kind of struggling with. How do we market it, right? People that are still kind of, I don't know about you guys, but when I talk about emergency management, people are like, oh, like, wow, that's probably interesting, but I have no idea what you're talking about, right? What is that? Or they think it's all related to homeland security and terrorism, and that doesn't resonate. So as we look at how we're going to make this happen for the kinds of recruitment we do for students and whatnot, I really think that we need to look at changing the message, the content of the message, especially I think with younger people, emergency management or any of that kind of like, I think people, maybe young people tend to think only about law enforcement and maybe not some of the other kind of nuanced things that we do in emergency management. And it's really about communities, right? Resilience of any kind is really about how you connect with all of the different aspects of your community, how you build that up. And I think maybe focusing on attracting those young people who are interested in making a difference in their community in some fashion would in fact be a good fit with emergency management. And I think they still maybe don't know what we do. So what we wanted to do was have a discussion about what are some things that we might do to for recruitment, maybe even going to some of the colleges and talking with them. And then this handout here that Linda put together that says diversity and inclusion in emergency management career pathway, goals and objectives.
There you go. And so, and I just want to clarify, this is for all hazard. This is our whole group. So it's criminal justice, it's occupational health and safety, emergency medical. So, you know, I tend to use emergency management kind of in the all encompassing, all of this, because when you look at our career pathways, you know, they're pretty white. And they are, they're starting to be a little bit more female friendly, but not so much. I've been talking to folks about what's the statistics, you know, are we reflective of our population in these career fields, and we are not. So our educators are not reflective. I am in a training cohort for the quarter that is at Pierce, and it is all about diversity and inclusion. So I'm, you know, spending every other week talking about this, and heard just this week with the group that the disparity between people of color and that are actually faculty in our community college systems in this state compared to what the general population is it's 1-to-8 ratio. So, I mean, the fact is that our general population is reflective of the diversity of our culture, but the actual educators are very white and male, still. I mean, incredibly so. So, yeah, and so it's a national initiative with the national effort, and it is a priority for our community college systems it's one of the things that the state board has put as, we need to really look at broadening and being more reflective of what our population looks like.
Well, and also when you look at who's most affected by any kind of disruption to daily life, it doesn't even have to be a major disaster, right? It's those folks who were then not represented by those who are then going to help them, whether it's in the fire service or any of the other. And so maybe then they're not getting the help they need because they don't see themselves represented, and probably don't trust those that they see as coming to help them, right? So I really feel like we have an obligation to meet them where they are instead of that. I think that's the other thing that we've done, I think both in education and in this field, is expecting people to come to us. Instead of saying, let's meet them where they are, what do they think? How do they see themselves being part of this, any of these pathways? And how can they be then, how can their voices be represented in what we're doing? So, what do you guys think? Sorry. And yeah, ideas about making this happen.
This is it's a long-term effort to move forward in a different way in how we are outreaching and appealing and being inclusive. And it's still, the sad part, and just what we talked about with our cohort group at Pierce this last week, and our minority representation in that group, unfortunately, we still have more people of color ending up dropping out because of skirmishes with the criminal justice system, and they're not making it through college because of, or the education system, just because of the issues around not having role models and others.
I think we need to look at Highline's diversity officer, who's the officer, who is a very, very diverse campus. They actually have an African American president here. They have that Black and Brown.
Yeah, did you get
conference.
No, you didn't get a response to them.
We get a response from Steve about it, but they have, I think, starting with Highline, working with their people to help us get the connections we need.
Is it worth looking at where the people who are filling positions in these disciplines, where they're coming from? Because if they're not coming through the community college system, if the majority of them are coming from fire service, law enforcement, military, then I'm not saying that within these programs that we don't workforce diversity, but then it's kind of partnering, going to the root of,
Right. Yeah.
in the recruitment in those feeder disciplines, of how are we communicating equally, that the message is equally strong there, and not just until emergency, and I'm thinking mostly emergency management.
That's where you live.
Yeah, because that's where I live. That until they're is enough of a recognition that it is a discipline on its own, but then it has to, I think there are some other core competencies that aren't a part of our programs now, traditional programs, that would, if they were equally emphasized, they would draw a different kind of candidate.
Yeah,
If people recognize that a lot of emergency management, because while the ability to apply structure and develop a plan and execute that experience, the ability to do that does legitimately come through fire service, law enforcement, military. That for the general civilian population, that a lot of that comes from the ability to collaborate. And that means the ability to facilitate conversations that we, coming from that kind of authoritative background, most emergency managers don't do very well. That's why recovery is always the last to be addressed until you have to. But, you know, if we were able to really have, if we had those core facilitation skill sets, and I know you've heard me go on that soapbox before, but if we were better at facilitating the conversations with the community so that conversations about recovery and mitigation happen now and that we're working towards those instead of something happening, and that's where we catch up.
yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that's why that community building, the resilience piece has been missing even in our messages about what it is that we do. Because that's how you're successful. It's not, oh, be prepared and have a kit in your garage or your car. That's not, it's really about what are we doing as a community. So that whole aspect of connection that you're talking about and be able to facilitate conversation, I think will bring a whole different group.
And I think
And
then
that's what's missing.
in that arena, if we're drawing candidates into positions from nonprofits, from organizations that have been more successful at facilitating community programs, then it changes the demographics, I think, right there of who steps into the positions.
You need to reach out with Pierce County. They already have a group that goes with the diversity. I've gone, and then they hold it like at the Star Center and whatnot, and I've gone about 4 or 5 years. And they are reaching out already to the community and getting groups to come in for resilience and whatnot. And maybe that's where you need to go out to and say, hey, I already have this group coming in that's interested. We have a career opportunity here, and maybe present that to them, and you can get out into the community through them with these organizations that are coming in, nonprofits, communities, churches are represented. And they would be a good place to get out and get the word out.
One thought that I have, this, I'm not on the board, but I will throw this out as a thought. Historically, people became emergency managers and then they learned about it. If they came to the military, they still had to get civilianized to communicate and function effectively. Now we have people trying to become emergency management educated, and then they went into the field. And it's still very difficult for them to get those jobs. I remember about 2 years ago in Oklahoma City having a long discussion over dinner with a state director, whose name I forget, who was telling me there's no entry-level positions at the shop. He has since hired 2 or 3 entry-level positions. Because after listening and arguing with him for 2 hours, I went away thinking I had lost, and apparently I didn't, because he started looking for people. So, but I think really the key is to go to the communities, and not so much to get recruits, because if we're that good and the message is we can help you and your community get through these things will help you and your community get through the bad times, they'll start finding you.
Right.
They'll say, how do I get some of that? Because I know that when the military department and the state went into the school system and got kids that were having trouble in their youth academy. All of a sudden, those kids said, hey, I want to be in the military. That's what happened a lot. They said, I want to go, I want to be in the Guard because I like the structure and I like the sense of purpose it gave. Well, we can't do any of that, but we can go into communities and show those young people, high school kids, you can have a role in helping your community. You can do that. And time, this will take time. They will start to gravitate towards this job. That, assuming that we're open to hiring young people who don't know it all yet, who just think they know it all yet. Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma has 2 or 3 millennials working for them. And because I was an outside person, the director who was going to retire anyway, said, if they come to you, let them talk. You're a former director. Let them complain about me, complain about everybody, but see if you can help them understand how to survive around here in this 35-person shop. And these kids would come in and talk to me about this. And the one thing that got them, because they were really smart. They could do anything. But they couldn't understand why it took so long to accomplish something in government. They couldn't understand why they weren't getting their salary double every other year. And I couldn't necessarily explain that to them, but I could tell them that their problems really weren't the 60-year-olds that were driving them nuts. It's the 9-year-olds coming up behind them that will see them as dinosaurs in 10 or 15 years. And that they needed to really be thinking globally about what they can learn from these old folks while they're still developing as professionals. And I think that going to those communities, staying there, even if you don't get a lot of results right away, it's still our job to reach out to everybody. It's still our job to make sure people can get through whatever happens, because we're not going to be there right away. You're not going to be there right away. I'll be out in the community, having it happen to me. But the big message you should give people in preparedness is we're here now because we're not going to be there like you would normally expect, because we're going to be digging out from the rubble ourselves and trying to establish communications. You're going to be 3 to 6, 10 to 12 days without the things you're dependent on normally. So we want you to be prepared. We're here now because we won't be there then. That's the kind of thing that I think can work, particularly with high school kids or with college students. Get them to turn towards emergency management. They will eventually, because it's an honorable field. I don't think we need to reestablish ourselves or change our name. I know there's silly things I hear at the national level. We just need to be who we are and be who we are publicly and unflinchingly, because emergency managers do a terrible job of tooting their own horns. But we don't have to toot our horns. We just went out and did our job and talked to people. I think we've advanced quite a bit. Yeah, go ahead.
You make an excellent point. There are very few entry-level positions unless you are East Coast or where there's a lot of consulting opportunity, but there are very few entry-level positions in emergency management. Most shops are, 1 to 5 people, and you're wanting, a community wants to make sure that they've got a seasoned professional in that position. So figuring out how we create more interest for young people, students, and whether that's building something or piggybacking on what exists. We've been looking at our youth outreach practices. We don't have the high school CERT program, and that's something that we would love to develop, but looking at opportunities to, with the cadets or with whether it's law enforcement or fire, can we steal some time in their program so that they get some experience with emergency management, and how do we make that exciting and interesting when EMS and law and fire is certainly more sexy. So figuring out how we can.
Curry, and I'd add to that too, Curry, it's not just what can we do to get them to come to us, to come to us. It's in any kind of recruitment. It's understanding how labor intensive it is. What you're asking for is labor intensive, because it's not just can the college recruiters go out and find more of them to come to us. It's can the industry show that there's a place once you get here. The activity we just did, Cascadia Rising 2016, City of Redmond did a 2019 Cascadia Rising Solutions. In order to get community involvement, We did it on Friday, we trained everybody once a month, we did training on Friday, but we also trained the community on Saturday. And I can't tell you how many people looked at our department and went, I'm sorry, you work on Saturday? It's like, no, that's not overtime. That's when the community can come engage. So we consider that a normal thing that we do. We don't consider it overtime to send somebody out to something in the evening. That's just, when we talk about flexing, it's when does the community do this? Then we go there on that day. So it's labor intensive in terms of the industry changing its standards. I whined like a crazy woman at WASEMA, the Washington State Emergency Management Agency, that Cascadia Rising 2022 coming up. Can we have it on a Saturday? Oh, definitely, Saturday, overtime, the server. Well, if you're not coming for us, and all the models say that, when your community needs to be there, couldn't you have them engaged in an exercise? Yeah, but that's overtime, FEMA, we'd have to, you cannot imagine the grumbling from the tags
So
to
you can't do it
Robert
on
to
Monday
that.
either.
You can't do it on Monday, well, they said you can't do it on Monday because, well, remember in 2016, you can't do it on Monday because Washington State doesn't work. Well, when Washington State changed its thing, all of a sudden FEMA said, all right, we'll do it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's beyond, but it's that idea of, so it's labor intensive for the industry to adapt to that.
Right.
So can you find a couple of partners that could say, we'll offer an internship, and you have to be there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or your externship, or your something. Can you find a partner who can adapt it? Then the labor intensive part is with us as emergency managers to say, you have a department of 3. Could you take one of them and make it a entry-level position, knowing it's gonna be labor intensive on those other 2 to train somebody up to those standards? Because it's gonna be really labor intensive to bring somebody in from a degree program and say, I know you have the academics on it, but now you have this. And so it's that awareness of labor intensity systemically, not just reach. So I think that this institute is really important, and that you come back to either senior fellows or to your board and say, all right, this is what everybody has to throw in terms of labor intensity, because we can't look to you know how it works. Well, we hired in our diversity expert. I'm sure they'll
Right.
fix the problem for us, as opposed to how can we contribute
Right.
to fixing that one? Oh, man, I have to hire in a newbie. Shoot, I'd rather hire in her because I know her and she's done well enough to there. And so it's that systemic approach. And it doesn't solve anything for here today, but maybe it is an approach to look at them and say, what are best practices that all of us can do? And then when we come to you and say, could we do Cascadia Rising 2022 on Saturday? You all say, yeah, we should put a letter out to FEMA and to the state saying, it would help us because we'd be able to get in the police explorers to play on that day, and they'd never play on a Monday.
Let's do good exercise.
I think, I agree with you,
I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
bang the hammer. Scott's about to explode. He's been waiting to comment for about 10 minutes. So Scott, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the ways that we've been attempting to address both the virtues as well as the job hunting aspects is by teaching our students on how to properly conduct informational interviews while they're looking for work, and also to help them identify areas of interest that they have that cross with emergency planning, so that they recognize that there's more than just the classic municipal, county, or state-related emergency management jobs out there. What I frequently tell my students is that chances are, if there's something they're interested in, whether it be, I don't know, Xbox, or whether it be skiing or travel, Disneyland, obviously, that there's chances are someone who does what we do in those fields and helping them to look way beyond the very narrow scope of just municipal or public employment as it relates to emergency management. And so we found some success with that too, helping the students to look beyond that particular mark. And I think that's where we need to continue as an industry and as at least in the HSEM program, to continue to support them, is to help encourage them to develop those job-seeking skills. I'm afraid that many of our students come in not knowing how to look for work, how to look for a career, rather, is what I should be saying that way. But, for some contemporary examples, Siri McLean, the first emergency manager for Zillow, an online property management company, or online property, sales company. Fascinating. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would ever thought that Zillow would need an emergency manager. And so I think part of our future effort needs to be helping our students understand just how broad this field is. And it may not be called emergency management, it may not be called business continuity, but the opportunities are out there. And it's a matter of helping them develop the skills they need to find them.
Absolutely.
I think that there's been some different points in trying to get back to kind of like what's the source and following through the process. If we're trying to get diverse students into the program, but we know part of our process is wanting to have a pathway that actually leads to a vocation, that part of the challenge is in our industry changing that culture and expectation as well for wanting to look for those diverse skill sets. Because I think now when there's an opening, it's like, oh, well, do they have ICS and NIMS training? Oh, they have a military background, a law enforcement background. Instead of looking at more of the soft skills side of things that would open the door to allow for more diverse entry into the process. So it's not just how do we make sure we're reaching out to diverse students, and we don't want to just put people in diverse leadership positions. We want to have them go through the process and mature into that. And it's changing that culture so that we can have that maturity for it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I wasn't just talking about recruiting students. I was actually talking about our message as emergency managers is not resonating. People are like, what? I don't get that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think those are excellent points. And it's really those other skills that make you successful. It's not the.
Yeah, I mean, talking to somebody now applying for a job and like they'll be like, oh, I'm interested in emergency management, but I don't have the background, I don't have the experience. And I was like, you do event planning, you're very organized, you
Right.
facilitate conversations all of the time, so those definitely translate. And so I think that we need to educate our industry though to do that translation so that we can open the door for more diversity.
Well, and again, I think to do that, we have to look in again at emergency management as a profession. What are the skill sets required? We haven't done that in a long time, and if you look at other programs that NOAA that do a lot of similar planning and what makes them successful, where emergency management has struggled, it's many different soft skills, but they make their core required skills. And so if we review our degree program, look at how we recruit, what the required skill sets are, if we add some of these, not just so that as we review candidate profiles, we appreciate that they're there, but that if they become required skills, might be.
One of the best people I ever hired finished 8th or 9th in a clerical test. But I was reading her resume and I found out she had ended up working for William Johnson for 8 or 9 years. She had worked for Herblock, the cartoonist, as his research assistant for 4 years. And I said, 25 years old, I got to talk to her and find out what made her go work for a cartoonist. Well, the guy was involved in all kinds of research activities, she was researching his column or his cartoons, and he would take her ideas and draw. And he was a world famous cartoonist. He wrote Richard Nixon, that's good. Other than that, he was really a guy who was very controversial, and he would have 10 or 12 ideas that she had produced every week for him, and he would do this cartoon for the Sunday edition, and that was a big deal for her. So I talked to her, I asked her if she wanted to come where, she said, only if I get to work with people. That was the only thing. And she was the fingerprint unit of the police department in Seattle now, but the thing was, she didn't come with any emergency management background. She picked it up really quick. The best people I had in Seattle, and that was a previous staff, 12 years, came from all over the place, but they had problem-solving skills, they had empathy and compassion. They've been through a number of things, and not only a couple of them had direct emergency management experience. It helps to have emergency management experience, but when you're building a staff, you've got to have a lot of different types of people that feel in your community. So we have disaster Saturdays in Seattle for a number of years there, and people actually came and walked around and went to different stations, learned about mitigation, learned about home retrofits, learned about response, and actually we talked about recovery sometimes too, despite the fact that it was that, and so, which is the same reaction you get from the Seattle City Council, by the way, yes, recovery. So the thing is, there's a way to reach out to people together, but you can't pigeonhole yourself into a degree set or anything else. Those things are helpful. Everything you get that helps you learn about emergency management makes you better. But the skill sets that come in, you either have it or you don't. And that's what I found. I got people with lots of great background that couldn't perform in a crisis to save their lives or anyone else's.
We've had a lot of conversations about, in NEMA, the National Emergency Management Advanced Academy, about these, how do we have those hard conversations about what is it that makes you a good emergency manager, and what is the skill set and all of that. And I think we've relied on the CEM for quite a while, because there wasn't anything else frankly, there was nothing else out there, and it was a standard. And then, though, I think we're also finding that some people that have CEMs are not good emergency managers. So that is not the.
I see the smile going. Let's see,
I mean,
do
it's
I know
just-
anybody like that?
Right, just say it like it is. So this institute, this thing I'm doing in Georgia, isn't about education. It's about the profession. How do we kind of have those hard conversations? So I'll be curious to find out what they think and what we do there, and if will help us at all, and then what we need to do. But it's really a partnership. A lot of the points are excellent, and we really need to continue the conversation about how we kind of change that mindset going forward.
Well, and Kelly's right. I mean, we did find the what is it? The Highline group called again. I have no idea.
Black and brown.
Black
Black and brown, something.
and
There's something else out
yeah.
there.
And good timing, young lady.
Okay,
We're just talking about diversity and inclusion.
perfect.
Yeah, and you have a faculty here on campus. I sent Steve Luddig a message about the, what is it,
Black and brown.
Black and Brown Male Summit, it's
Yeah.
coming up soon.
Yes, it is coming up soon.
I'm embarrassed, I don't know when it is.
It's like it's really soon. It's like,
What day?
yeah.
Is it this weekend?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Okay,
So I wanted Steve, and for you guys to talk, because in talking about how do we expand our all hazard emergency management career fields so that we are more representative of the population
Mhm.
that we serve. And I had never heard about the
this is like the 10th annual.
yeah, no, as I
Yeah.
started reading about it, I sent it out to, I think I sent the information out to you
You
guys.
did.
But I had never heard of it before.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I'm looking at this going, what did they do? Because this is, I mean, it's like, we've got to take action. We've got to reach out. We can't wait for some metamorphosis to happen.
I'll be happy to tell you about it.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I know more about Yale than I know about the Black and Brown, but it's specifically geared towards young men of color. As I said, it's the 10th annual. It started up fairly slow, so Rashad Norris and, I don't know if Rakita is involved in this one or not, but
They started it because men of color, young men of color need those good role models, need to be told what their job options are, different things that they may or may not get exposed to at home, and just to build that community. And so that's basically what's happened. It has just grown by leaps and bounds. Once they got past the third year, it was like going crazy. It's really, really big. I personally don't involve myself in that one because I'm involved with the Young Educated Ladies Leading, or YELL. And that comes up in May. And that's for young women of color. And it's the same type of thing. You're talking to them, you're giving them different career paths, you're exposing them to robotics, you're exposing them to just about everything that they wouldn't normally see or have good role models for. And YELL is in either its 4th or 5th year.
Wow.
And it just, the reason they kept them separate is because the needs of young men of color are very different than the needs of young women of color. And so it's worked out very, very well that way. And yeah, like I said, it's good. We at Highline, of course, have 74% students of color. We are the 4th most diverse college in the nation. Yeah. And we currently offer 8 bachelor's degrees. Yeah. Yeah, it's very exciting. It's good. And unfortunately, yeah, Steve is traveling this week.
Yeah.
He's at a conference, and then, yeah, I will tell you something afterwards that I'm not sure what's going to be, but I just found out. Yeah, you can guess.
Are we also gonna talk about, I mean, with regard to things like the people of color, LGBTQ?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we also have that here at Highline. That's very big. We have LGBTQ week here. I think that was only a couple of weeks ago. So there's just a lot. And it's really just exposing them to what's available and what their rights are. It really is very, very good.
So, Amelia, if we thought about doing a forum or something where we could start to involve ourselves more, what would that look? I mean,
I would say get people presenting at these different events. I would say, yeah. I mean, that's
like at YELL.
at YELL,
Yeah,
at get on the Black and Brown Summit for next year,
yeah.
and just be a regular table. You know, since you're government, you could even show up here in CCDC at the cyber competition. It comes up in March.
Okay.
The other thing, and I think they're still active, is Blacks in Government. Big. I know, the first time I went to a Blacks in Government meeting in Spokane, I thought it was it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun considering Spokane. I lived in Coeur d'Alene, which makes
I was gonna say, then
I was thinking too.
Well, the one message that I keep hearing, ring in my ears from my cohort that is where we're talking about our diversity inclusion is action. Talking about it is not going to cut it. You've got to take action and physically move your mind and body,
Right.
to
Go do it.
yeah.
Well, it's sort of what happened with women in cybersecurity. This one lady back in Tennessee got an idea, approached the National Science Foundation, and said, I want to give a conference for women in cybersecurity. And they said, okay, maybe 100 people will show up. This was in 2011. 350 of us showed up. That was the first year. Now it's up to over 1,200. If you look at the Grace Hopper Conference, it was over 20,000 this year of women in computer science. And that's from all over the world. 2 of my students got to go. They got full ride scholarships to go. They paid their plane fare, hotel, per diem, everything to go to the conference. So you just have to start it. And just getting more people of color into law enforcement and just into emergency management period is needed. And to make them aware that that's a job involved.
a really good opportunity.
And I think we need to relook at that study that Wilhelm did for Northeastern.
Yeah.
Because she mentioned how, because she's a criminal justice, she's a researcher. She said that the criminal justice field is actually gonna grow to where there's more women of color in there. So we just kind of go back and look to see what the actual statistics are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But we gotta say, well, and it's partly her research was showing that based on the skills that women bring to the profession, the soft skills, the communication skills, that's why they will grow in numbers, because the actual skill sets that are needed for working in communities are those soft skills, not the, pull out a gun and.
Right. Right. Even.
Yeah,
I do know how to shoot a gun.
Yeah. Well, I do too, but yeah.
They can de-escalate the situation.
Right, right.
So it doesn't get to that level.
We don't want to get to that level.
um,
But yeah, I mean, fields that women typically would not look at, they need to be shown that this is something that they can do and be good at. Be very, very good at.
One other thing, I almost hesitate to bring it up, but what the heck, I'm retired. That is that too often emergency management directors can't just go out and do what they want to do. They are in rigid HR structures in the police department or in the military department where you really feel very constrained about how you can even recruit and how you can go about recruiting. And it's necessarily, it's right, I'm just saying that's a problem. That when you're in the military department, the HR director for the military department runs the hiring process if you've got a vacancy. The only way I was able to promote women at all was, and I got chewed out for doing it, was I used temporary authority. And then after 6 months, made it permanent. And because they've done a good job. But you had to override an HR director to do that and pay for that down the road.
Yeah, you do. Liz, you had a thought too.
I was just going to suggest more forums like this, because I think too often the emergency managers we have in the field don't know if they're frontliners, because the experience in the city, but the experience in the military, law enforcement, or fire, sometimes the emergency manager has that inquiry. So if we could go to Waseem, if we could go to England, if we could continue with your advanced academy distribution, we could get our own emergency managers and talk. We get better diversity. We need help getting travel.
First time in its history, NEMA has a woman president and a woman vice president. The contested election.
Well, when you brought up about the military, I just had the pleasure in August of going to my friend's retirement party. And she was Lieutenant General Stacey Harris of the Air Force, and she's a woman of color. We went to high school together. And so it's just like amazing. And to see how many major generals were there to see her retire. So it does happen. It's just, I don't think people get exposed to it enough. She runs the Tuskegee Airmen group down in Los Angeles, the club. And then also goes around and speaks to women's groups all over the country. And she's not quite good enough to
Could we do something with Jasmine's podcast or something, where she could do like weekly interviews with people who don't look like me? We're doing this type of work or whatever.
Yes.
And then, people who are like me could make my students check that out and put on my website as an opportunity for people to get to and to watch and just whatever they do.
Is it worth reaching out to the groups that exist that represent different communities, LGBT, people of color, to say, hey, what do you want to know about us? What's the most effective way for us to share information about opportunities, so that we're not guessing how to connect with them, but we're getting them to tell us?
Yeah.
Could we just go back to those skills that we were just talking about, instead of, what do you want to know about us?
how about, what can I learn by you?
Yeah.
And how can I, you know,
Right.
what is it we can do to bring to you, or something like that? I think that, we just had a DV panel, and we had 8 different agencies come and talk, they're all advocates, and it's like, so, you know, you're a real diverse group of people, why is it that you only deal with African American women? And they're like, we have a different experience in this world than you do, Bobby, right? And they talked about the police and all kinds of things, and I think that that's really what I want to get my students to see, is that we have to go to our community, because that's who we serve, find out what it is that they need,
Right.
and then change.
Yes.
That's my thought.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the whole thing, which, and what she brought up about technology. And just getting students to know that they can support, our law enforcement with technology. So a lot of my students, actually like work for Kent PD on their cars. I have a graduate who's down at the Des Moines, jail doing their IT. I mean, it's all these other things that are part of supporting the police. So there's a lot of different things that we can do that people don't normally think about.
Well, it's action. You've got to reach out. You can't just sit and talk about it. So it is, you know, providing that opportunity for that discussion and reaching out to make sure that it happens.
I almost would have to run and ask. I don't know if it's too late to get a table at the Black and Brown Summit.
Let's ask.
Yeah, that would be the thing to do. If it's this weekend, it might be, but you
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah, well, that was,
Or
that was,
somebody could cancel it.
yeah.
Well, there's that.
Well, that was why I was hoping that Steve, because I had sent him the message to see if he could have.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. He's gone through the end of the week.
Yeah, no, but, so,
I can ask.
okay.
I'm trapped.
You were trapped in.
Just sort of leaning.
That like study table is right there in front of the door.
Yeah. Right.
Well, certainly, Amelia, if you can help, but if we can reach out to the folks that are actually doing the work and how we can tap into that and take action, that would be great.
Definitely.
But I love is it Yell?
Yeah, young educated ladies leaders.
One
And
thing
that's coming
to,
up in May, so that probably by January 3rd at the latest, I'll be gearing up.
one thing to remind us about is trying to put together the BAS program. We looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's about 6 emergency manager jobs across the state.
Yep.
But there were business continuity positions, there were disaster recovery, risk management. So it's not, we can't simply use the term emergency management, and we can't focus on the municipal side. There are literally hundreds, like Scott said. Zillow has an emergency management. So we have to make sure we're spreading that information
Right.
as well.
There are all those other titles that are related, yeah. And Amazon, I think, has 6 or 7 different positions related to emergency management that all have different names.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I teach disaster recovery and I teach, you know, what happens when a big one does hit. What do you do? Where are your backups?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you get back up? Safety first and all this other stuff, but yes, there's a lot of things that we can get people into.
So we're gonna start, and we're gonna get them into it, and we're gonna go through it. and- Yeah,
Barbara Black Brown.
do.
And I will
So
introduce, have you met with Keitha Reed?
I haven't,
Okay. I was just saying, if you've ever been up in Building 9, you would have met her.
yeah.
Okay.
Or
So
at
she
least
runs,
if I have, I don't remember, I mean, I don't remember.
okay, so she runs Yelp. but I'll
Okay.
do it.
So have you got enough to take back to?
Yeah,
the-
I'm gonna soak up.
And bring that here, yeah, so, but no, it was good timing because she's going off to the national organizational meeting for emergency managers, for diversity and, yeah.
The new Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management, brand new. So we're talking about, how are we gonna make this, how do we do this?
Linda, how many people you said the conference is November 15th to 17th?
Yeah, I knew
Which
it
is
was
just
coming up.
coming next
Oh,
week.
it's this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
To get a table on you then.
He won't be able to manage.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well,
We'll find out.
yeah,
We can still talk to them.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we can talk to them.
Definitely. No, I'm giggling because, like, I got into engineering because of the Minority Introduction to Engineering project back in the 70s. Long time ago. What is now Mesa started off as Mike. And it's just watching how the different fields have changed.
Yeah.
But then, if you look at engineering, it's still only about 2% black, the same way it was when I graduated. So there's some things that still haven't quite changed, like with the hiring the HR people, and they're interested in hiring people that look like them
Right.
and that they're comfortable with. And so it's
Yeah.
getting them out of their comfort zone in order to make that happen.
At Pierce, we've been working really hard at hiring a more diverse faculty. We went through and changed all of our announcements. Like the first sentence in our announcement basically says, do you want to work in a community that's committed to social justice?
Right.
Not like just,
Yeah,
kind of
changing
puts
the
it out there
language, right.
right off the bat.
Yep.
The other thing I was just gonna say is, we also work with the, we call the skills centers for the high schools, and sometimes they have, like career nights, and Cindy usually goes to them. And then also we have one or two that we actually put on a whole day forum for them to come, and we get people to pay for their lunches and talk about our programs and stuff like that. And so, it's kind of works, but, let's see what happens. I think if we start earlier and get into some of the, schools that maybe are predominantly kids of color, that might be a way of doing it too. I mean, if I could get to Lincoln in Pierce County and go, hey, here's some great opportunities for you, here's some mentors for you. Oh, I have the mentors, do I? That'd be good to have the mentors there for them too,
It would.
to help that.
Yeah, we're actually having to start with like 6th and 7th grade, to get into cybersecurity, to get them interested. Because by the time they hit high school, it's too late.
You probably already heard about it in 6th grade anyway, right? It's like it's the thing now.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it is.
it's the thing field everyone wants to be connected to in some fashion. things like.
True, but they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
When I ask them to define cybersecurity, they're like, look your cell phone, how many of you have a cell phone?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting. Right.
All right.
Great stuff, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is going to be one of our major objectives, guys, to really open up our vision and sight and focus on reaching out to the world.
Reaching out to the world, what a concept.
Yeah. Hey,
Actually, I think we just got a dean of diversity and inclusion.
we are all, because of the state board has a priority goal for diversity and inclusion. So all the colleges are getting new deans. Pierce has got a new, was it Charlie? What's Parker? Parker, yeah, Charlie Parker is
right?
Yeah,
That's what I was
yeah.
thinking. Has to be everybody though, it can't just be the.
But I also do, you know, Patty Jean, I think certainly Wasima needs to be involved in this discussion as well. I mean, we need to reach out to our associations and as the past president for Wasima. Yeah. All right, I think that we have got plenty to work on here and we will get,
Do you have any
I will get with
date announcements on anything we haven't talked about yet, Kelly?
No.
No? Okay.